McHenry Protective and Investigative Services. With over 50 years of experience in public safety and security, McHenry's team of experts will safeguard you, your commercial property, and your next big event. Professional service, marked patrol vehicles, 24-hour dispatch, and friendly, observant, and responsive armed and unarmed guards are just a few of the reasons you should contact McHenry at 559-478-7747 or visit them online at mchenryprotection.com. Hi, I'm John Mallos. Welcome to this live edition of Connect with me on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this day. It is what day is it? It's a Tuesday, that's right, the day after the Iowa caucuses. Glad you're here. The telephone number is 436-ME-TV option 11. Today we're talking politics. We're also going to talk about this new book that came out. It's called Game Changers, the 12 elections that transformed California. The author of this book is here. He's here to talk about the book, the Iowa caucuses, which he covered, by the way, as a political reporter. You're welcome to call in. Are the results shocking to you? We'll be back after this from McHenry Protective Services, our sponsor on the program today.
Tonight I want to discuss the importance of the television medium to the American people.
So glad you're here on a Tuesday morning, the day after the Iowa caucuses. Stayed up very late last night watching the results on CNN and all the other stations, and very interesting. We'll get into all that, plus we'll talk about the book. It's called Game Changers. Very interesting read. You ought to go get it. I mean, the author is in the building today. He's my guest today, so we'll talk to the author about this. He's a former political reporter, a political analyst. He covered the Iowa caucuses. We'll get into all that. 436-ME-TV option 11. McHenry Protective Services is your sponsor today. Hey, a little programming note for tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm not going to be here personally. It'll be a tape program that we did last week with Peter Nazaridian. And it should be a good one because he's our resident family therapist. He's talking about OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It is quite hilarious to a certain extent, but very serious. It can lead to serious complications, of course. It can control one's life, so we'll talk to Peter about that. A taped program tomorrow. Anyway, you're watching us live on Comcast, channel 375. As usual, we call it Xfinity. And Comcast is our partners, and we thank them for that. But if you don't have Comcast cable, you can still get us over the air on regular broadcast television at 43.6 or 13.1. As usual, you can purchase those digital antennas anywhere. But Comcast and over-the-air broadcast is your main source between 10 and 11 o'clock Monday through Friday. Then the replay of this program comes at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 13.6 YouTube, and 8 o'clock tonight, 4.6 TV, all part of the Ventura Broadcasting family, some 27 channels. And then, of course, our program ends up on YouTube, and it's up there forever, my friends, until the end of time, 24/7 if you want to catch it. And so you can watch those replays. Like if you can watch our program today for only about the first 15 or 20 minutes, you can catch the replay later in the day. So let's get right to it. In Iowa, the voters have spoken. The pundits are out, the media is out, all the consultants are out, all the experts are out. The voters are the ones that count. The people on the ground doing the counting and the voting last night in Iowa. It went late into the night. Donald Trump finishing second to Ted Cruz. Oh yeah, the senator, of course, winning big by 4 points in Iowa. It was Cruz with 28%, Trump with 24%, Marco Rubio, the surprise third place winner, and you can call him a winner at 23%. But Trump was humble, he was gracious, he showed humility in finishing in second place. In the meantime, who really won between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders? It was 50-50, a dead heat, but the Democrats in Iowa declared Hillary the winner early this morning. Here's a report from Iowa on the results from last night.
Ted Cruz. An upset night in Iowa. Ted Cruz besting Donald Trump.
Tonight is a victory for courageous conservatives across Iowa and all across this great nation.
Trump pressing on.
They said, don't do it. I said, I have to do it. And we finished second, and I want to tell you something. I'm just honored. I'm really honored.
And the nail-biter, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders.
No president can do what has to be done alone. And that is why what Iowa has begun tonight is a political revolution.
It is rare that we have the opportunity we do now to have a real contest of ideas, to really think hard about what the Democratic Party stands for and what we want the future of our country to look like.
And now, the race to New Hampshire, the nation's first primary.
Look, please give me your vote, okay? Please.
Republicans John Kasich, Jeb Bush, and Chris Christie left Iowa early.
I'm happy to be back in New Hampshire. And there's work to do because I understand there's still some undecided voters in the state.
Getting a head start, courting New Hampshire's more moderate voters. The question now, how does the race change?
The number one story out of Iowa tonight is Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio put himself forward tonight as the very clear establishment choice, the person who could potentially rally the establishment conservatives to support a single candidate.
This day after Iowa starts with fewer candidates, Governors Mike Huckabee and Martin O'Malley suspended their campaigns. Iowa kicked off the first votes. New Hampshire may further define the race to the White House in just 7 days. Alex Sands, The Associated Press, Concord, New Hampshire.
All right, live in our studio now is Steve Swatt. He is an author. He wrote the book I showed earlier. We'll show it to you again. He is a former UPI reporter. By the way, he went to Cal. He's a bear, that's right. Former KCRA political reporter in Sacramento, political analyst, an adjunct professor at Sacramento State. And Steve is here live. He has covered the Iowa caucuses. He knows what it's like. He knows it inside out, my friends. And we'll talk about Hillary and Bill Clinton. Very interesting. I was focused on Bill Clinton's face last night when Hillary was giving her speech. I don't know if you could call it a victory speech because at the time we didn't know who the winner was. Was it Bernie Sanders in your mind or was it Hillary Clinton? Anyway, our guest today, Steve Swatt, drove all the way from Sacramento, a long 2.5-hour drive. He wrote this book. It's called Game Changers, a great book. I recommend it. It's the 12 elections that transformed California. You got to read this book. It's the history of politics here in California and how it was transformed over the last 100 years and more. Anyway, 436-ME-TV. Option 11 is the telephone number. McHenry Protective Services is your sponsor today. Got an open phone line? Back with your comments and Steve's observations on the Iowa caucuses in a moment. Businesses choose McHenry Protective and Investigative Services. With over 50 years of experience in public safety and security, McHenry's team of experts will safeguard you, your commercial property, and your next big event. Professional service, marked patrol vehicles, 24-hour dispatch, and friendly, observant, and responsive armed and unarmed guards are just a few of the reasons you should contact McHenry at 559-478-7747 or visit them online at mchenryprotection.com.
Not sure what you're watching? Want to see what's coming up next? Or just want to browse what's on without the hassle of flipping channels? Your wish has come true. Now you can view schedules for all the digital TV channels available in the Central Valley. Get local weather updates and forecasts, and listen to nationally syndicated Biz Talk Radio, all on KBHF 4.1. Rescan your TV now, then tune in to digital channel 4.1 to start enjoying the all-new TV guide.
Excited about today's program. It is February the 2nd, the day after the caucuses in Iowa. My friend Steve Swatt, longtime friend. Good to see you.
Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming in.
Nice to be here.
I appreciate it. It's great to see you. You look the same as you always have.
A little grayer. A little grayer.
Well, but look at me. Gray. Anyway, the Iowa caucuses. You covered the Iowa caucuses when you were at KCRA as a political reporter. Before I get into last night's results, what do you think of the process there? What do you think of the people in Iowa and how they go about and what the procedure is in Iowa, which is unlike any other place in the country, any other state.
Well, I think the procedure is great. I mean, I like the idea of voters trudging through the snow in the evening, you know, maybe a blizzard, whatever, and there was a blizzard when I was there back in the 80s, and then going to the church basements or the school cafeterias or the libraries, standing up for who you want to support. I think there's something great about that process. But I also think, as a Californian, that it's oversized in terms of the attention that it gets. I mean, first of all,
you think it gets too much attention?
I think Iowa gets too much attention. Now, I understand why it gets the attention. Well, it's been all over the news for the last 2 months. And look, Hillary Clinton has spent 100 days in Iowa. She's not going to spend any time in California, because California, first of all, is a blue state, and she doesn't have to spend her time here, and it's not one of those states that are up for grabs. But look, Iowa is not representative of the rest of the country. It is like 92% white, very few minorities, 50 or 70, I don't know, 70%, 60% evangelical Christians, and that's not, you know, representative of the entire country.
Most are farmers.
Well, you have a lot of urbanites in Des Moines and things like that.
Okay.
But yeah, you have a farm community. And what they do talk about farm issues and ethanol and corn and things like that. The other thing about Iowa is that everybody makes a huge deal about Iowa, but it's not determinative. Going back to 1976, only 53% of those candidates who won Iowa went on to win their party's nomination. So you lose as often as you win.
See, I saw an interesting stat yesterday, which I did not know. I don't know if I read this in the paper, if I saw it online. Only 3 presidents have won Iowa and gone on to win the White House: Jimmy Carter, George W. Bush, and President Obama.
You have
Is
to
that
remember,
true?
but Iowa only started in 1972.
Okay.
That was the very first time there was a they caucused that.
All right.
And 1976 really was watershed, because Jimmy Carter, former peanut farmer from Georgia, church deacon, governor of Georgia, totally unknown basically, spent all of his time in Iowa when nobody else was. And he won. Actually, he finished behind the uncommitted slate, but he was the top candidate. And all of a sudden, people started noticing, who is this guy, Jimmy Carter? And other candidates in subsequent elections started realizing, well, Iowa can be very important in terms of momentum, fundraising, and things like that. So it took on a life of its own. And it was because it's important. There's no doubt about it. But I do think the attention on it is oversized. And look, Iowa is a fairly small state. In terms of Republican and Democratic delegates to the convention, it's like 1% of the total. Mm-hmm. So it's more flash than anything else.
But one thing that Iowa does, and I was thinking about this last night, even if Iowa is not that significant in even the primary election, it does get you a lot of publicity, a lot of attention. So if you go to Iowa, the cameras will be there. You'll be on television.
That's right. Oh, you're on television for the weeks leading up to it. There's no doubt about it.
So the publicity, you just can't buy that.
Well, the media loves a fight, and they get tired of talking about, you know, this poll and that poll. They want to see some actual votes. And so when those actual votes are coming, the media is all over it. But look, Bill Clinton in 1992 finished with 2.8% of the vote in Iowa. Mm-hmm. Then he went to New Hampshire and finished second. He claimed himself to be the comeback kid, and he basically swept to the nomination after that.
So he got 2.8% of the vote in 1992?
In Iowa.
Wow.
He got nothing.
Got a phone call coming in here. Caller, you're on the air with Steve Swatt. Go ahead.
Yes, I was listening to the thing yesterday, and hearing all the candidates when they talk, they sound very enthusiastic, high-spirited, but when you hear Bernie Sanders talk, he's like no energy at all. I mean, he doesn't sound like the rest of them. You know, with Hillary, the way she talks real enthusiastic and gets to the people, but Bernie Sisk, I mean, he's so quiet. I don't know. And what surprises me, I don't know if your guest agrees, but Jeb Bush, I mean, for years after he finished his office in Florida as governor, I mean, there was a lot of talk that he would be the one that would be entering the White House after Obama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's
and
right.
What happened to him? I mean, nothing. I mean, I got together with a bunch of my friends the other day, and we were talking about this, the elections and everything, and most of my friends were saying, well, you know, it surprises us because, see, Jeb Bush can speak Spanish very fluently,
Right.
and they say, well, he should have appeared on Spanish radio, Spanish TV, gone to the the people, the Latino vote, but he never did.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you, caller. I appreciate it very much. It's nice to hear your voice again. I hope you're doing well this morning.
A couple of points. First of all, you mentioned the Latino vote regarding George Bush. There's very little Latino vote in the state of Iowa. And that's one of the, and yes,
92% white, you said.
it's about, I think it's about 4% Latino in
Okay.
the state of Iowa. And the thing about George Bush, yes, he comes from Florida, has 29 electoral votes, which would make him, a very important, make him an important candidate because he could presumably deliver those 29 electoral votes in a fall election. But he has totally fallen flat, and he is the loser from last night, because here, his campaign.
What did he get, like 3% or something?
He got 2.8% actually, but he gets a little bit less than 3%. His campaign and the super PAC supporting him spent $14 million on ads, just on ads in Iowa, down the drain. He spent $2,800 a vote last night.
Wow.
That's $2,800. He and the super PACs, $2,800 a vote, and that is 10 times more than Rubio, 18 times more than Ted Cruz spent, and 34 times more than Donald Trump spent.
Wow.
So now,
34 times more than Donald Trump
Yeah.
spent in Iowa?
that super PAC, which is run by Karl Rove of the Bush administration, has plenty of money. I mean, he has spent tens of millions of dollars in September, and he's got like $59 million left if he wants to spend it. But the money, that's what's so interesting about this campaign, the money in ads is just not working.
Wow, amazing. Well, maybe maybe Donald Trump is right. Low energy.
Well, he's low energy. Let me make one point that the caller made about Bernie Sanders. I was watching a Sanders speech late last night, and he had lots of energy. When he gets riled up about Wall Street, you can't stop him. Of course, a lot of people consider him to be everyone's crazy uncle.
He's your crazy Bernie uncle, and I don't know. I've always known him to have high energy because he always speaks with this angry tone, doesn't he? Why?
Because he's angry at Wall Street and the income inequality and what Wall Street did to bring down this country economically back in 2008, and so it does anger him, and I think that shows in his talks.
Yeah, you can just see it. I mean, the smoke is coming out of his ears when he speaks most times. But we got a big town hall meeting coming up on CNN tomorrow night, I believe. Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and then you got that final debate, not the final debate, but another Republican debate Saturday. As if we need another one.
Well,
I mean, we've heard everything we need to hear, don't we?
Well, yes, but what's going to happen is that the winnowing process starts now. Okay. Already you have O'Malley dropping out on the Democratic side, Huckabee dropping out on the Republican side, and after New Hampshire, several others will drop off. And so you're going to have a more concentrated stage, and so these candidates will get more time.
Yeah. We're talking to Steve Swatt. He is an author. He is a political analyst, former political reporter. He's covered the Iowa caucuses. We'll continue on the other side of the break talking about the winners and maybe the losers, or were they the losers last night in Iowa. Steve wrote this book. It's called Game Changers. We'll also talk about this because this has to do with California politics, the 12 elections that transformed our golden state of California. It is an amazing read. It's a history lesson. You got to let your kids read this book and, increase their knowledge about the state they live in. 436 MeTV option 11, an open line here on Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno. McHenry Protective Services is your sponsor today. Back in a moment. Choose McHenry Protective and Investigative Services. With over 50 years of experience in public safety and security, McHenry's team of experts will safeguard you, your commercial property, and your next big event. Professional service, marked patrol vehicles, 24-hour dispatch, and friendly, observant, and responsive armed and unarmed guards are just a few of the reasons you should contact McHenry at 559-478-7747 or visit them online at mchenryprotection.com.
Take a look at this. Let's play.
This is too hip for you. I'll slow down.
Let's play.
Watch all your favorite classic game shows on Buzzer TV, KBBC Digital Channel 13.7.
Back here on the program on a Tuesday, we've got the open line, 436-ME-TV, hit option 11. You'll get in quickly, and we're here to take your calls. Steve Swatt is here, and I should say that Steve and I used to work together at KCRA TV in Sacramento, the NBC affiliate, and still one of the top-rated stations in the entire state, if not the entire country. And Steve was there many years covering the Iowa caucuses and covered state politics in Sacramento at the state capitol, so he knows the capitol inside and out, knows Governor Jerry Brown well. Did you ever talk to his father, Pat Brown?
I sure did.
You did. So
I
you
talked
knew
to him
as
many
well.
times.
Yeah, interesting.
Interesting story. When Jerry Brown, I talked to him for a documentary I did on Jerry Brown, and Jerry Brown, of course, won his first elected seat in 1969 for the Los Angeles Community College Board. And I'm asking Pat Brown, his father, all about that, and he says, "Well, I'm not being, I don't want to puff myself up, but the only reason Jerry won is because of my name."
So tell me, before we get into it, how many governors have you known in the past? Starting, obviously, we talked about Jerry and Pat Brown. What other
Well,
ones?
I started covering governors with Jerry Brown, although I covered Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
His last 4 years.
So you knew Ronald?
I knew
Could you
Reagan.
Were you on a first name basis with Ronnie?
I didn't cover him that much. I don't think so.
Okay.
But I interviewed him several times.
Okay.
And then Jerry Brown, and then George Deukmejian, and then Pete Wilson, and then I'm still involved in public affairs, and so I've met Schwarzenegger and things
How
like
about
that.
Gray Davis?
And Gray Davis. Gray Davis was my neighbor at one point.
Okay.
Yes.
Arnold, did you ever come in contact?
I did.
You did?
I did, yes.
Good guy?
Interesting guy. Let's put it that way.
Interesting.
What is so interesting, and one of the things in the book, and I know we're going to talk about the book later, but one of the things you find out in the book is that there are many unintended consequences with an election one year. Looking in the out years, here Gray Davis is recalled because he messed up the state budget and the energy situation. They weren't his fault to start with, but he certainly made them a lot worse, and so he is recalled from office. Schwarzenegger takes over as governor. When Schwarzenegger promises to clean up government and do everything that Gray Davis didn't do, when he leaves, he's got a 23% approval rating. Only 12% of the state of California people believe that the state is on the right track, and he left the next governor with a $25 billion budget deficit.
Unbelievable.
How was that for an unintended consequence?
Yeah, he cleaned it up all right, didn't he?
Yeah.
Talk about Iowa last night, and Donald Trump showed a lot of humility. He was gracious, and surprisingly, my friends, he was humble. Did that surprise you?
A little bit. I mean, Donald Trump has had the national lead for 215 straight days now. It's amazing that he has been in the lead for so long, and he's done it by being, of course, bombastic. And if you go back to his book, The Art of the Deal, he talks about denigrating opponents. That's good for business. Well, he's been doing that certainly in terms of this election.
Yeah.
Hyperbole can be good. He's done that. I mean, he basically laid out his campaign strategy in that book, which was written in 1987. But he will be back to the old Donald, if not today, then tomorrow in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And he can't call.
He's predicted to win in New Hampshire, right?
Right now, he's ahead in the polls.
Okay.
What you don't know is how does the voter's psyche, how does that change from Iowa to New Hampshire? A lot of voters make up their mind the last week or so of the election, right before the election or the last few days. So will some people say, well, gee, I like Cruz because he won in Iowa, although Iowa is totally different than New Hampshire. New Hampshire is much more moderate for the Republicans.
It's really the first primary, New Hampshire.
It is the first primary.
Yeah.
And it's much more moderate. You have a lot of folks moving up from Massachusetts and things like that. And so that's probably why Donald Trump, who is not a rock-ribbed conservative, is polling much better in Iowa. But I think, that's why Kasich and Bush and Christie believe they've got a shot at doing pretty well in Iowa and in New Hampshire. And that actually is, for some of them, maybe their last hope.
Quickly, Ted Cruz, 43,608 votes, the most ever by a Republican in Iowa. So everybody said the pressure is on Ted Cruz. If he doesn't win, he's out. He won by 4 points.
Well, even if he didn't win, he would not be out. Now, he may not have a good night in New Hampshire, but on March 1st, you have a dozen primaries. mostly southern primaries. Ted Cruz should do very well there. Texas is one of them. He's from Texas. So he's got a long-term strategy, and his long-term strategy originally was not necessarily to win Iowa or New Hampshire, but to hang around, win big in those southern states, and then close fast.
Your thoughts about Marco Rubio from Florida. 23%, of course, 28% for Cruz. He finished 5 points behind the leader. I guess you could say he exceeded his expectations. And the other question is, the second half of that question is, I've heard people say that the way he speaks and his style is kind of like a JFK.
Well, let's talk about the expectations. He exceeded the media's expectations, the political expectations, by a great deal. He was a big winner last night, because here you have an ABCT movement, anybody but Trump and Cruz, the so-called establishment Republicans, and there's a lot of money out there waiting to be spent. Who is going to emerge as that alternative? Is it going to be Bush? Is it going to be Kasich? Is it going to be Christie? Is it going to be Rubio? Well, Rubio certainly has put himself in a position to be that alternative as we move forward. He got 23% compared to Christie,
and Jeb Bush.
Bush and the other guy. Combined 7%.
Right.
And so he did very, very well. And so I think moving forward, he's in a good position. If he should finish second in New Hampshire, I mean, he's certainly in the upper tier, the top tier right now. He would be difficult to beat, I think, down the road.
Charles Krauthammer wrote an article recently that I read in the Fresno Bee that he said the Republican Party is in a shambles right now, because you got Rubio, who's part of the establishment, Trump, who's way out there doing all kinds of crazy things, and then you got the scorched earth guy, Ted Cruz. Would you agree with that?
I do.
Yeah.
I believe that Ted Cruz, because he is so intransigent by design, he doesn't want to compromise, doesn't want to work with Democrats, has very, very conservative positions. I think it's very hard for him to expand his base to win a national election.
Yeah.
As for Trump, Trump has said so many things,
outlandish
things, and angered so many people. I mean, his disapproval rating is like 70% among Latinos and very high among women. I think it'll be tough for him to expand his base. Rubio could expand his base. He's from Florida. He's an immigrant. Immigrant family from Cuban American. Now he's flip-flopped on immigration, and that could come back to help him or haunt him, down the road.
Take a quick break here. Talking with Steve Swatt. He wrote this book called Game Changers: The 12 Elections That Transformed California. We'll come back and talk about Hillary and Bernie Sanders real quick, and then we'll get into Steve's book for the last half hour of this program. It is a very interesting read. And I'm telling you, if you like California and you like living here, you should know a little bit about the history of politics in the state and how things are run. And why are your taxes so high, or why are your property taxes so low? You can thank Prop 13 for that, my friends. It's in the book. 436-MeTV option 11. McHenry Protective Services, our sponsor today.
Tune in to Heartland for the best in true country music. Relive vintage specials, one-of-a-kind concerts, and country music's earliest videos. Heartland is the heart of country, the only place where you can find country music, country stars, and country lifestyles 24/7. Heartland, the heart of country.
Now on channel 13.2.
The new Frigidaire Professional line at Ventura TV Video Appliance. Enjoy generous-sized cooktops and sauté or simmer with ease, while true convection ovens offer even baking and juicy roasting perfection. Foods stay their freshest in spacious refrigerators with convenient controls and clear filtered ice and water. Easy to clean surfaces reduce fingerprints, and the quietest of dishwashers makes cleanup a snap. The new Frigidaire Professional line at Ventura TV Video Appliance.
Back here, 436-MeTV option 11. The Iowa caucus is done. Everybody is in New Hampshire. That's the focus now. But last night, 94% of the precincts reporting, Steve, and Hillary Clinton and her camp declaring victory. And the Iowa Democrats now say, yeah, Hillary won, but it was 50% and 50% for both sides. So how do you determine who won? I'm not quite sure I understand.
She determined that she won.
Okay.
That's it. Look,
that's it?
Bill Clinton in 1992 finishes...
Well, who gets the delegates then?
Well, first
how
of all...
do they split that?
The delegates will be split.
Okay.
I mean, 50-50. And these are delegates to the state convention before they even determine the delegates to the national convention.
Oh.
So that's down the road. But it's important for her to claim victory and get people saying that Hillary Clinton claimed victory. And
why doesn't Bernie Sanders claim victory?
Well, he did. He said we're starting a revolution today. Tonight. That's what he said last night. So they're both claiming victory, and they both won. Really, what was important for Hillary Clinton though is not to lose badly.
But didn't she lose just by tying?
No, not necessarily. It was going to be close anyway. I mean, yes, she should have, based on early polls. Yes, she should have won. I mean, if you go back 6 months, she had 62% of the vote, and Bernie Sanders only had 4%, right?
I know
and look
it.
where he's come since then. But think of this. If she lost Iowa by a significant amount, let's say, and then she's probably going to get creamed in New Hampshire, because New Hampshire is sort of Bernie country right next to Vermont.
Vermont, yeah.
She would then be limping into South Carolina, which is a strong state for her, with 2 losses. And that would set the Democratic political establishment a Twitter. What's wrong with Hillary?
She can't put this guy away.
And it's exactly. I mean, again, the crazy uncle, right? You can't put him away. And I'll bet there'd be phone calls to Joe Biden after that.
You think so, really?
I would, yes.
Jump in the race, huh? Take care of this guy.
I think the Democratic establishment is very concerned about Bernie Sanders because they don't believe he can win.
They're scared of his politics?
No, well,
too left-wing, too socialist?
Well, he's an avowed socialist, okay, and he has a program basically that would raise taxes on the middle class, and cost our national budget billions, tens of billions, and the feeling is the Republicans haven't laid a glove on him because they want him to be the nominee. Wait till he's the nominee, and they're going to go after him like you've never seen before and just tear him down. So there's a lot of concern among the establishment and the Democratic Party that he would not be able to win. And so that's why they want Hillary.
Quickly, in 10 seconds, and I want to go to break and get to the book here. Is Hillary shaking in her boots a little bit? Just a little bit?
No, she has a long-term strategy, and she has some upcoming states that are good for her. And so I think she would have liked to win by more, of course, last night.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're in a panic mode.
Yeah, but she got more percentage, bigger percentage than her husband did in 1992 in Iowa. Did she not?
That's right.
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, Bill Clinton didn't win New Hampshire either, but he came in second, claimed himself to be the comeback kid.
Yeah, when did Bill won on Super Tuesday, didn't he? As I recall,
well, yes, because
92?
Super Tuesday was a lot of southern states. Bill Clinton was strong in the South.
Yeah. All right, Steve Swatt is here. When we come back, we'll get into the book called Game Changers, the 12 Elections That Transformed California. There's the book right there, 436 MeTV Option 11. We're back after this from McHenry Protective Services.
Revan is now on KVHF channel 4.4.
The following is another list of things you will not hear on MeTV programs. Man cave, baby bump, whatevs, double half-calf mochaccino, faux hawk, redonkulous, totes adorbs, hella, holla, YOLO, cray-cray. And MeTV is still Kardashian-free. This is what you will hear on MeTV programs.
Bang, zoom,
Book 'em, Denham. The Twilight Zone. About the polls.
I object, Your Honor.
Mr. Grant.
I hear you right.
You heard me right.
Me TV. Thanks for listening.
Frigidaire. It means the first electric refrigerator. The first compact electric range. Now, there's the Frigidaire Gallery Range with Symmetry double ovens. It's designed to cook multiple dishes at multiple temperatures, so you can prepare the entire meal at the same time. Frigidaire, over 90 years of legendary innovation.
See the full line of Frigidaire appliances at Ventura TV Electronics and Appliances.
All right, back here with Steve Swatt. Let's put the book up on the screen. It is a full screen of the book. It's called Game Changers, and it's the 12 elections that transformed California. Quickly, because I don't want to run out of time, I want to get into all of these. But what prompted you to write the book quickly?
Well, actually, I had three co-authors.
Your
my
wife.
wife Susie and two other former reporters, Jeff Raimondo and Becky LaValle, and we were just talking one night up in Seattle. We were on vacation together, and Susie mentioned, you know, we've got like 150 years of experience covering the Capitol and all the players. Among all of us, we ought to write a book about that. And so this sort of morphed into this book, which actually starts in 1861, which was before I was born. But then when we were writing the book, which is primarily during 2014, we noticed all of the voter apathy. People were staying away from the polls in droves, and they were telling pollsters that they disliked politicians, were disillusioned with government. They felt their vote doesn't count. And we wanted to write a book that showed people that votes do count, elections matter, and elections have consequences.
Let's go to full screen number 1. And it's California's first big change, Leland Stanford, 1861. And talk about Leland Stanford. He was governor, elected governor, and he was also the president of the Central Pacific Railroad. But talk about the big four, too. Stanford, Huntington, Collis.
Collis P. Huntington.
Collis P. Huntington, Charles Crocker, and Mark Hopkins.
These were the so-called Big Four, or the robber barons, as some people call them. What was interesting is that here you had a situation where Leland Stanford is elected governor. At the same time, he is president of the Central Pacific Railroad. And he pushed legislation that helped raise money for the railroad's treasury to build the Transcontinental Railroad.
Thus money going in his pocket.
And money going in his pocket, making him a multi-millionaire at the time. Now he'd be a billionaire now. So if this happened today, he'd be in prison on racketeering and corruption charges. I mean, this could not happen today. What is also interesting, a quick story, is that when the Pacific Railroad bill was passed by the U.S. Congress, they said the railroad would get they would get $16,000 for every mile of track that it paved along the flatland, $32,000 for every mile of track that was paved in the foothills, and $48,000 for a mile of track through the mountains. They took out the state geologist who originally said, well, the mountains start at the Sacramento River. That's elevation 20. He finally said, no, that's not going to fly with the federal government. But they moved the base of the mountains to 7 miles east of Sacramento and charged the U.S. government $48,000 for work that they didn't perform.
Eventually, they blasted through the Sierra Nevada mountains, got the railroad through, the tracks through, and that was a big process. It took a lot of blasting.
It was, and it obviously took a number of years. By the time they met up with the Union Pacific in Utah, it was 1869.
Yeah, it took a lot of money and a lot of years.
And that brought the nation closer together. I mean, it was no doubt about it. It was extremely important. It brought the nation closer together. And obviously help with commerce.
Just a note to our director here, we're not going to do these in order, so I'm going to skip a couple here. Instead of going in order, I'm going to go to number 3. Number 3 deals with the Los Angeles voters, the growth, the spur of growth in 1905 in Los Angeles. And of course, you had about, in the 1920s, I read in your book that, and I don't know if this was a lot, I guess this was a lot, 100,000 settlers came into LA every year. Is that a lot? I guess back then it was.
Well, back then, you got to remember, in 1905 there were only 200,000 people. There were 200,000 people in Los Angeles, and the growth started really after the a lot of people say it was the water grab, the Owens River water grab, and what happened was surreptitiously, city leaders,
Owens Valley,
in the Owens Valley, William Mulholland And if you remember your movie Chinatown, and Fred Eaton, the former mayor, they bought up property or options on property. And this bond measure in 1905 would finance the purchase of the water options and property options in the Owens Valley. And what is interesting is that out of the 200,000 people in the city of Los Angeles at that time, only 11,000 showed up to vote on what arguably is the most important city election in LA history. And what happened?
How did that transform California? How did it change?
It created the megalopolis of Los Angeles.
Okay.
And without a steady water supply moving forward, LA could not grow, and that's the reason they wanted it. They had enough water in LA at the time. They bamboozled the public really into thinking there was a water shortage, and they basically faked the water shortage, and the LA Times at the time helped them.
I've often wondered why the boom in Los Angeles and why not in Sacramento. I mean, Sacramento could have been Los Angeles.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, you certainly had weather issues, but when you got rid of that,
LA's near the water too,
and the coast. But when you got rid of that fresh water supply issue, then it was no holding back for the city of Los Angeles.
Yeah, because as you know, Sacramento has room to spread, room to spread out. But I don't know. Let's go to number 4. Full screen number 4, Hiram Johnson, the election of 1910. And I like this one, Power to the People. A former California governor, former assistant DA. This has to do with a corruption trial that took place in 1908 to a certain extent and ended the railroad's grip on the state, the city, and the local governments, all thanks to what? You, my friends, the voters. Not you personally, but back then.
What is interesting is that he was on the prosecution team in 1908 that was prosecuting Abe Roof, the San Francisco boss, for corruption. That was 1908. 1 week into the trial, the lead prosecutor is injured severely when somebody walks into the courtroom with a gun and points the gun at his head and shoots him. He didn't die. The bullet lodged in his head. But the district attorney then turned over to Hiram Johnson the job of being lead prosecutor. He won that case, won statewide headlines, caught the attention of the progressives who were trying to change the railroad, get rid of the railroad domination, started in 1861.
Because the railroad controlled the state of California, right?
That's absolutely. They controlled virtually all the levers of power in the California.
So after Roof was taken down, it all changed?
After Roof was taken down, Hiram Johnson became a statewide figure, and Hiram Johnson was dedicated to taking down the railroad, so that when he ran for office and won in 1910, one of the first things he and the new progressive legislature did was put on the ballot for a special election the initiative, the referendum, and the recall, all designed to emasculate the power of the railroad. And look how much we cherish our initiative process today. That actually started with the railroad domination, which began in 1861 and then was changed after that 1911 special election.
Hey, we know about all the mudslinging in politics now, of course, with the presidential election and Donald Trump insulting every group known to mankind, insulting his opponents. There's a lot of, there was some insulting by Bernie Sanders on Hillary Clinton's part too. Not as much though. I mean, they've been pretty tame compared to the Republicans. But where did all this start? Where did it come from? Let's go to full screen graphic number 5. The modern day campaign, 1934, California's dirtiest election. This is kind of when the mudslinging kind of started, I guess you could say, at least in California it did. 1934, explain.
Well, 1934, Upton Sinclair was the muckraking journalist who exposed the meatpacking industry, and he was a socialist. But he wanted to run for office, had tried before as a socialist and couldn't win, so he changed his party registration to Democrat, wins the nomination, this is 1934, which is the Depression, and is doing very well. Well, the business establishment in the state of California was apoplectic. They were so concerned that, I mean, you know, Sinclair wanted to get rid of the capitalist system. So what happened is that what was created were the very first political consultants in the country, and they were created to take down Upton Sinclair. And it was Clem Whitaker and Leon Baxter, and they formed this team. And one of the fascinating things is that Mayer of MGM, he had his studio create phony newsreels. Now, this is before television, right? But they had newsreels in the theaters that
right.
showed.
Yeah, that's where people got their news.
They created phony newsreels, interviewing people with Russian accents, saying, "I want Upton Sinclair because he's all going to give us $1,000," or people pouring into the state of California, on boxcars, saying, we're Upton Sinclair supporters because he's going to make everything great for us. And these phony newsreels ran right before the election and helped sway the election against Upton Sinclair.
Wow, and Sinclair lost.
Sinclair lost. But there was, the LA Times, for example, ran a front page quote from, purported to be from Upton Sinclair that was negative every single day in the newspaper. And that quote was either by Sinclair himself or by some of his characters in his fictional books.
Yeah.
And they were totally misleading.
And apparently that's where the modern day mudslinging began back in 1934.
It did. That was really the dirty. You think the campaigns now are dirty? 1934 was
really dirty, huh?
Really bad.
Yeah. Steve Swatt is here. He wrote the book, Game Changers, 436 MeTV Option 11. McHenry Protective Services, your sponsor on the program today. Back with more in a moment. When so many Valley businesses choose McHenry Protective and Investigative Services. With over 50 years of experience in public safety and security, McHenry's team of experts will safeguard you, your commercial property, and your next big event. Professional service, marked patrol vehicles, 24-hour dispatch, and friendly, observant, and responsive armed and unarmed guards are just a few of the reasons you should contact McHenry at 559-478-7747 or visit them online at mchenryprotection.com.
When you're looking for KitchenAid innovation and quality, who has the answers, the selection, the price? Ventura TV Appliance. With billions in nationwide appliance buying power, more than Home Depot and Best Buy combined, we'll help you save. Our low prices on Energy Star qualified KitchenAid appliances save you energy and money, and pay no interest on select models when paid in full within 12 months. Ventura TV Appliance, serving you since 1951.
Back here with Steve Swatt, Game Changers, 12 Elections that Transformed California. Very interesting read. It's the book. And let's go to, I want to go to number 6. This has to do with Earl Warren. He is a former Chief Justice, former California governor, son of a railroad man, former DA of Alameda County. Now, this has to do with, in Alameda County, he kind of, I guess he favored many of the Asian residents that were there, mainly the Japanese. And a lot of people were saying that he used the Japanese as a way to get elected California governor right after Pearl Harbor was bombed. And you know what happened with the Japanese, the internment camps, the taking of the farms and the shops and everything else, money in the bank. What happened here in your judgment? Well,
what happened, he was, when he was the Attorney General in 1942, which also was the year he was running for governor the first time, it was right after Pearl Harbor, of course. And publicly he said he noticed that so many Japanese in California, most of whom were citizens, were living near military installations. And so he warned about sabotage. And he all of a sudden did a 180.
He favored the Japanese. He promised to protect them, right?
Then he pushed very hard for them to be interned.
Oh.
Yes.
So he did. He did.
Yes. Okay. And we note in there, a letter he received from this woman saying, thank you for protecting us. Well, then he turned 180 degrees and pushed really hard to have them interned. And the interesting thing is here later on in later life he became this very enlightened U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice, the author of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, the desegregation measure and things like that. Well, while he was alive, he never once publicly, even after the war, never once publicly said he regretted the internment of the Japanese Americans.
Never said, I'm sorry.
Never said, I'm sorry. And this was, even after the U.S. Supreme Court in 1944 said, we got to let these folks go because we can't keep them forever. It was not until 1977, 3 years after his death, when his unfinished memoirs were published, that he finally apologized and says it just does not follow with our system of justice in this country.
Let's
kind
go
of interesting.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Earl Warren, the former Chief Justice, as we all know, and former California governor. Let's go to another former California governor, a guy that you knew, Pat Brown, number 7. And, you know, Pat Brown didn't know if he wanted to run for governor. He was thinking about running for senator, and then he changed his mind, then changed back, and he was kind of a confused guy back in 1958, wasn't he?
Well, the rap on Governor Pat Brown was that often is that he sort of dithered. He couldn't make up his mind, and that happened in terms of the death penalty with Carol Chessman and things like that. That episode you're talking about was really fascinating because he was thinking about, he was the only Democrat who had won statewide office, and so his party leaders wanted him to run for governor. And so he decides, okay, I'll run for governor. And then he meets with Claire Engel, who was another prominent Democrat in Washington, who was a member of Congress. And he tells them back in Washington, he says, you know, I'm going to run for governor. You run for the U.S. Senate, and we'll sort of run as a team. And Engel says, okay. So that night, he can't sleep. He's staying awake. And he says, oh, my gosh, did I make a mistake? Should I run for Senate instead? Or maybe I should run for re-election for Attorney General. And so he decides, next morning, goes back and sees Engel. He says, you know, I've changed my mind. I'm going to run for the Senate. You run for governor.
Engel said, no
Engel
way.
said, no, we made a deal. Stick by it.
I know.
Right.
Hey, let's go to number 8. Interesting anecdotes about Pat Brown. And I remember when he was governor, and I did like him. Full-time legislature, 1966. This has to do with Jesse Unruh, this former Speaker of the House. Now, listen to this. Prior to 1966, the legislature in Sacramento, it was part-time. What, they were making like $6,000 a year? That was it? And it was part-time. They'd be there for a few months. They'd go back home. And then Jesse Unruh came up with the fact that he wanted a full-time legislature to be on equal par with the executive branch, the governor.
Correct.
Which they weren't at that time.
Well, if you can believe this, it was the governor who actually created the legislative agenda in even number years. So in even number years, the legislature couldn't take up a bill that the governor didn't want him to deal with. And so he wanted to elevate the legislature.
So the governor back then had more control.
Absolutely more control. Plus he had the Department of Finance, for example, to analyze his budget. And you know, in the legislature, they had very few staff, and so he wanted to elevate the staff, make it a professional staff, and a larger staff. And what is an interesting story, and it involves Hugh Burns, who was the former president pro tem of the Senate, a conservative Democrat from Fresno, and a mortician by trade. And
Hugh Burns, yeah.
Hugh Burns. And what happened was that Unruh was having trouble getting this Proposition 1A, the creation of the full-time legislature, out of the Senate because lobbyists, the biggest lobbyists, were blocking it, and they were saying we don't want any change. So Burns and Unruh called about the top 12 lobbyists, the biggest lobbyists, to a meeting in a hotel across the street from the Capitol, and Unruh starts saying, he says, you know, I know you don't like this measure. But it's very important to me. And I know you can kill it. You can kill this measure in the Senate if you want to. But just remember that you have clients who want legislation to get passed out of the Assembly and the Senate. And I guarantee you, if you kill this measure, we will remember what you do.
So that's how he pushed it through the Senate?
Yes.
He kind of blackmailed them in a way, didn't he?
Not kind of, he did.
He did blackmail them, but they had to change the Constitution, and not change it, but revise it.
Right, they revised
the California Constitution.
Yes, and that was a vote of the people. And what was so interesting is that here you had somehow Unruh and his campaign team, which was Whitaker and Baxter, left over from the 34 campaign. They first got Ronald Reagan to support it. Ronald Reagan was running for governor. And here's a guy who wants smaller government, and this was going to make government larger, yet he supports it. Then they got Pat Brown to support it. Here was the guy who was going to lose some of his power vis-a-vis the legislature, and he supported it. And so the two of them became co-chair, actually, of the committee, Reagan and Pat Brown, and it won pretty easily at the polls.
Yeah, as I recall, and that was a long time ago, was Jesse Unruh a tough, hard-nosed, cantankerous guy, a cigar-smoking Arnold Schwarzenegger type, just real cantankerous and tough?
Yes, he was the first of the modern assembly speakers where he would get campaign money from all the lobbyists, right, and collect it himself and dole it out. And so that way they made the other candidates who received his money, like him, and will do favors for him. He was very tough. He locked up the assembly for a night over the budget and things like that. There was one story where he was taking a vote on a bill he wanted passed, and there was one Democrat who would not vote for the bill. And so he just walks up to him, whispers in his ear, and says, "Change your damn vote." Just like that.
Hey, let's go to number 9. This is my favorite one, I have to admit. Proposition 13, 1978, protecting California homeowners, a tax revolt. This was the landmark property tax that would slash property taxes, keep them in check. It's why your property taxes today don't go up. It was Peter Baer versus Howard Jarvis. Baer accused Jarvis of trying to suck billions out of the government. Jarvis would go out and say, "Hey, I know how to work a crowd. I'm like a goddamn Baptist preacher." And Prop 13, how important was that to California, and how important was the fight for Howard Jarvis?
Well, it's important to California for a number of reasons. One, obviously, it had ramifications both good and bad moving forward. I mean, it certainly helped keep people in their homes, especially the elderly, who saw their taxes going up and up. And it also, that was really a dividing point where you saw people using the initiative process much more than before. And so that's why we have so many initiatives on our ballot these days. What is interesting is that Proposition 13 really started in 1965. You had a scandal amongst a few county assessors, and it's because they were sort of playing favorites and cutting deals when they were assessing property, and the legislature changed the law to tie property assessments to inflation. And then when there was heavy inflation in the last half of the 1970s, that's when people were being thrown out of their homes.
All right, also in the book, number 10, term limits. I like this one because lawmakers, I don't think, at least that's my opinion. I can give my opinion on this show because I'm not a newsman anymore. But, well, I guess I am to a certain extent. But I like this because lawmakers should not be allowed to stay forever. So who's the guy that went head-to-head with Willie Brown? It's Peter?
Peter Shabaram. Peter Shabaram was a former running back at Cal. And the 49ers.
You believe that?
And he had very few friends in the legislature, even in his own party. The
Willie Brown
Party.
hated him.
Willie Brown hated him. There's one quote in there. Yes, he did. He cut off his mic. He cut off the mic when one of the Republicans wanted to introduce Shabaram on the floor. And then there was another time when Willie Brown presided over a big fundraising dinner, fancy dinner in Southern California, and at the end, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, "Now everybody, thank you very much. Go home, drive carefully. Unless you see Shabaram, then don't worry about it so much."
But that really changed the face of California. That was the beginning of the end for Willie Brown.
It was. Well, that's right. He lasted until 1995, but this was aimed a lot at Willie Brown, although the backers, and we interviewed one of the major backers, said, no, it wasn't really at Willie Brown. It was at strong leaders. We wanted to sort of break up that power.
Brown was in for how many years? Like 18 or 19 years?
15. 1980 to 1975. But this really was an effort to punish legislators who they thought were arrogant and did not care about their constituents.
Finally, number 11, there is a chapter in the book that deals with public health benefits for illegal immigrants. It was 1994. It was Proposition 187. You remember former Governor Pete Wilson really backing this one, and then you had the two elections that shattered the spending records, the Gray Davis recall and electoral reform. Do you want to talk about any one of these?
Well, I can talk about the Gray Davis recall. We mentioned it earlier, but what I found was interesting is that we were talking to the consultant who was involved in the campaign to oust Gray Davis, and there was a New York Times reporter in there with him, interviewing him as he's opening up envelopes, and a lot of checks are coming in for the campaign, and all of a sudden a check falls out for $2,000.
Wow.
And they pick it up and say, wow, what is this? And he looks at the check, and the consultant notices in front of the New York Times reporter, gee, the address is like, this is next door, this is Gray Davis's next door neighbor. So the reporter goes out, interviews this older woman, and he says, I hate Gray Davis, I hate Gray Davis. And he asks her why. He says, well, he never smiles in the neighborhood. He just comes and goes and he never smiles. I'm not going to vote for him.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting story.
Interesting. The Gray Davis recall, and then you had Schwarzenegger coming in, and you talked about that earlier, how he was going to clean up the mess, and he really didn't.
Right.
He left it in a bigger mess than what Gray Davis did, even though Gray Davis sold all this energy to where, Texas or someplace?
Well, Enron's schemed California, and he paid the price.
Steve, I haven't seen you in years. It's a pleasure to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks. And
my
thanks
pleasure.
for the book. I appreciate it very much. It's called Game Changers, 12 Elections That Transformed California. Quickly, in 10 seconds, where can they buy this? I forgot to ask you earlier.
Is there a Barnes & Noble in Sacramento?
In
Fresno. I know Barnes & Noble is carrying in all of its stores.
How about Amazon?
Amazon.com, of course.
All right.
Yes.
All right, there it is, Game Changers. Put up the full screen of the book just real quick before we go, just so we can get one more look, and then we'll say goodbye. Tomorrow's program is a taped one. It's with Peter Nazaridian. He's a family therapist talking about one of my favorite topics, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Back tomorrow, taped program. See you live back on Thursday.